The term genocide has been used by many to describe what Israel is doing to the people of Gaza. But is genocide really an accurate term to describe what is going on here? And if it is, what makes this a genocide? Well, let's analyze it. In this video, I'm not going to tell you yes it is or no it isn't. Rather, I'm going to list as many arguments from both sides of the debate as possible, and then I'll let you make up your mind whether you think it's genocide or not. First, let's look at terminology. Genocide refers to any act committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, an ethnic, racial, national, or religious group of people. It is only a genocide if the victims are targeted because of their ethnicity, race, national group, or religion. It is not a genocide if the victims are targeted randomly, regardless of their membership of a particular group. And also, if mass killings are committed against political opponents, dissidents, or critics of the government, that is also not a genocide because they're not being targeted for their ethnicity, race, or religion, but rather because of their political views. And if a country's military kills a massive amount of armed rebels, terrorists, fighters, or soldiers from another country's military, this also isn't genocide if they're not killing them for their ethnicity, race, or religion, but are rather just killing them as an act of self-defense, also as to win a war. Again, it would only be a genocide if the goal is to eliminate a cultural group and to target them purely based on their ethnic, racial, national, or religious group. Any of these 5 acts constitute genocide if done with the intent to destroy a people. 1. Killing members of the group. 2. Causing them serious bodily or mental harm. 3. Imposing living conditions intended to destroy the group. 4. Preventing births. And 5. Forcibly transferring children out of the group. So, has Israel committed any of these acts? Well, the first act listed here is killing members of the group. For over a month, Israel has been conducting non-stop airstrikes on Gaza. So far, 11,000 Gazans have been killed, including 4,000 children and 3,000 women. For those who believe these killings constitute a genocide, the argument goes like this. Israel is clearly committing a genocide because it is intentionally killing thousands of innocent Gazan civilians in a very short period of time. The majority of the Gazan deaths are not Hamas fighters, but rather women and children. Israel is targeting areas where it knows there will be heavy civilian deaths, bombing places like schools, hospitals, neighborhoods, refugee camps, markets, and mosques. These particular bombings are done with the obvious goal of killing civilians who weren't even involved in the Hamas attack on Israel. The widespread bombing of Gaza is mainly killing civilians, not the Hamas fighters Israel is at war with. Israel is killing Palestinian babies not because they're armed gunmen trying to conquer Israel, they're killing these babies purely because they're Palestinian. Clearly the goal here is not just to wipe out the Hamas militants, the goal is to wipe out the Palestinian population of Gaza. Those are the arguments made by those who believe these killings are genocidal. Now, these are the arguments made by those who disagree and believe the killings aren't genocidal. Israel is clearly not committing a genocide because its goal in this war is purely to defeat and destroy Hamas's military and overthrow its government in Gaza. Israel is targeting Hamas military compounds, command centers, and bases. However, Hamas is using the Palestinian civilians as human shields. It operates in built-up residential areas, positioning tunnels and rocket launchers in near proximity to mosques, schools, and homes. Hamas is hiding inside these passages underneath houses and inside buildings filled with Gazan civilians. Hamas's main operations base is located under a hospital. In these ways, Hamas is using its people as shields against Israeli airstrikes. Israel's goal is to destroy Hamas, and if Hamas chooses to hide in civilian areas, then Israel has no choice but to attack those civilian areas in order to weaken Hamas. But this does not mean that Israel is intentionally trying to kill Gazan civilians. It is targeting Hamas fighters, but the actions of Hamas has resulted in Gazan civilian casualties. Israel takes extraordinary measures to prevent civilian casualties. Before it bombs buildings, it warns the people inside that the building is about to be bombed, so as to give those Palestinians time to flee the building before it gets attacked. If it just wanted to kill all Palestinians, it wouldn't care about warning them to escape to safety. Israel also ordered the 1 million Palestinians in the northern half of Gaza to flee to the southern half, since the Israeli invasion would be focused on the northern half. It gave the Gazans 2 weeks to evacuate from the north so that they could avoid getting caught in the crossfire. This all clearly shows that Israel is not just trying to kill off the Palestinian population, but is rather trying to kill Hamas fighters, which inevitably results in unintentional civilian deaths. So yeah, those are the arguments made for why the killings don't constitute genocide. Now if we go back to that list of potentially genocidal acts, number 3 on that list is deliberately inflicting living conditions calculated to bring about the group's physical destruction. Israel has been accused of committing this genocidal act in the form of its bombing of civilian infrastructure and its total blockade of Gaza. The argument goes like this. Israel is imposing unlivable conditions on the Gazans with the intent to destroy them. It has bombed and destroyed refugee camps and neighborhoods, leaving Gazans homeless, without shelter from the environment. And it has bombed and destroyed hospitals and ambulances, meaning that wounded Gazans are unable to get the medical help they need to recover from injuries caused by Israeli bombings. Israel's bombing campaign, which mostly affects civilians, is leaving them homeless, vulnerable, and without access to sanitation and medical care. These actions constitute genocide as they're done to deliberately compromise the physical well-being of the Gazans, with the intent to bring about their destruction. Israel's total blockade of Gaza is also meant to create unlivable conditions for Gazans. Israel blocked the entry of food, water, medicine, fuel, and electricity to Gaza. This blockade has created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Cutting off food will make Gazans starve to death. The lack of clean drinking water has forced Gazans to drink water contaminated with sewage, seawater, and farm water, making them vulnerable to disease. Cutting off fuel means ambulances are unable to transport injured Gazans. Cutting off medicine means injured Gazans are unable to get treatment for their wounds. This blockade is genocidal as it is designed to bring about extremely poor health with the intention of exterminating the population of Gaza. Those are the arguments. Now, here are the counter-arguments. Israel only bombs neighborhoods, refugee camps, and hospitals because Hamas militants are based in those areas, and they use the civilians there as human shields. Israel is not targeting these places so as to kill Palestinians purely based on their nationality. It's targeting these places with the sole intention of wiping out Hamas. The blockade isn't genocidal because Israel's end goal here isn't to kill the Gazan civilians. It's to starve out and weaken the enemy, Hamas. Israel has said it will lift the blockade once Hamas releases the Israelis it kidnapped. The blockade is not an attempt to exterminate the Palestinians. The blockade is an effort to force Hamas to surrender the Israeli hostages. Israel is willing to lift the blockade so as to avoid massive civilian deaths, but Hamas is the one refusing to give up, and so Palestinian civilians end up suffering, but that is not Israel's goal. Those are the arguments against the idea that Israel is committing genocide by imposing unlivable conditions in Gaza. I've covered most of the main arguments from both sides, although there are more. I mean, other people who believe this is a genocide point to the language used by Israeli politicians, such as, "we are fighting human animals." This language has been described as dehumanizing and an incitement to genocide, and it has been compared to how the Nazis described Jews as subhumans, fleas, and parasites. It's argued that by dehumanizing Palestinians, the Israelis are trying to normalize and justify the slaughter of them, and so this is seen by many as proof of genocidal intent. Others have disputed this, stating that the human animals thing was referring to Hamas fighters, not Palestinians as a whole. Also, the Prime Minister of Israel tweeted that this war is a struggle between humanity and the law of the jungle. Many have described this as another example of dehumanization, where it's implied that the Israelis are the human ones, while the Palestinians are basically wild animals. Another argument made against the idea that Israel is doing a genocide is that for decades the population of the Gaza Strip has been increasing. The argument holds that Israel clearly isn't on a genocidal campaign of ethnically cleansing Palestinians because the Palestinian population is higher now than it's ever been, and it continues to grow. So now that you know what both sides have claimed, what do you think? Do you think Israel is guilty of committing a genocide against the Palestinian people and has a clear goal of wiping them out? Or do you think the term genocide doesn't apply to this particular situation and that there isn't evidence of an intent to destroy the Palestinian people? Share your thoughts in the comments below.